Hello again. Welcome to the YouTube channel of Nancy Hart Battaglia. And we're talking about my book, Blame It on the Full Moon, because I was born right after a total eclipse of a full moon. And I'm sure it has influenced my life because I've had a lot of strange, unusual things happen. And I think it's the influence from that energy of that full moon that night. So I thought I would share a couple of experiences with you. I believe in magic, and that is not witchcraft or the work of the devil or anything like that. Everything comes from God. I believe that sincerely. And I have conversations with God. So did Neil Donald Walsh. He wrote 4 or 5 books about it. But you can have a conversation with God. And God will talk to you, and God will help you if you ask. And your angels will help you too. Again, you have to ask. And I have been to a lot of lectures. I've gone to Hay House 4-day seminar. I went and spent 4 days with Sonia Choquette, whom I met at a Hay House seminar, and she had a 4-day seminar on developing your intuitive skills. And I've heard Neil Donald Walsh, who wrote Conversations with God. I've heard Wayne Dyer. I've heard Deepak Chopra, Marianne Williamson, who was involved with the Course of Miracles, and I even had the pleasure of taking her to dinner one night a few years back when she spoke at my Unity Church. And I've been, and Bruce Lipton, and so many wonderful speakers who are also of this mindset. We know that there's much more to life than this illusion that we're living, and that what we see and think is our reality. There's a lot more to it. And to me, it's very magical. And magic can happen if you let it, and if you invite it in and are not afraid of it. And some of my most wonderful, strange, interesting experiences have come from magical experiences. So I thought I would share a few of those with you. And I was going to show you, when I first started studying with Peter Calhoun, underground Atlanta was flourishing. There were wonderful clubs with jazz and music, and Dante Stephenson, my dear friend, had a restaurant down there with his alligators in it down the hatch, and there was a metaphysical store that sold tarot cards, and it sold astrology charts and things, and it was a fascinating place. So a friend of mine from California was in town, and the first visit, I guess this was the first visit he came. He came several times, and we were sitting on my deck of I had a 2-bedroom condo at Colonial Home, or apartment at Colonial Homes. And I had the 2nd and 3rd floor, and we had a deck on the 2nd floor, and you could sit there and look out. And it was very peaceful. And we were talking, and we were saying how we had been such good friends in California and still felt a connection. And I was sort of tapping into that and feeling where we might have known each other. And he was saying that he went to a church. He lived in the San Diego area, and they had a woman minister who was quite well known at the time. And she was very metaphysical. And after church one day, she stopped him and told him she was picking up on a life he had had in Italy during the Renaissance period. And she told him a lot of the details, including a ring that he wore. He was of nobility, and just a lot of information. Well, while we're sitting there talking, I start picking up on it and seeing the same thing, and knew that I had known him in that life, and that I too had had a life there. And it was interesting because I had all these psychic friends who were mediums and astrologers and very talented and very gifted in a lot of these areas. So I was telling one of them about this, and she said, yes, that you all were married in that life. And when he was gone, you used that big signet ring to seal documents with and all, and that you all were of nobility. And she told me the same name that woman had given him. She told me that was his name. And she also told me my name. And it was like fascinating. So we went down to Underground, and I'm going to show you something. This was my first crystal ball ever. It's a beautiful, clear crystal ball. It's reflecting right now the lights around here, but it's a beautiful little crystal ball, just right to sit in the palm of my hand. So Neil bought that for me that night when he was in town and we went down there. And we came home and he bought a little gold stand for me to sit it on. And he said, "Do you see anything in there?" He's fascinated with all of this. And I thought, I've never looked in a crystal ball before. I'm not sure how this works, but I'm going to look anyway. And you need to clear your mind. You need to say a prayer. You need to connect to God and your angels. You need to meditate. You don't just pick up a crystal ball and say, "Oh yeah, here's what's happening." So I did. And when I looked in it, I was shocked. I actually saw something, and it was a man standing there looking like Father Time. Long white beard, white hair, white beard, white outfit. He looked something like you would imagine maybe Merlin. I'm going to show you this. Maybe you would imagine Merlin looking like. And so he looked like this, only everything was white. And it really shocked me to see. And see how his arms are outstretched? So he's sitting there with his arms outstretched to me. Or standing there, not sitting. He's standing there with his arms outstretched to me. And it was as if he was inviting me into the ball, into the world of mystery. I have always believed that Merlin really existed, that Camelot and Merlin, that it could be at a different dimension that happened to coincide with Earth at that time. But I'm sure that I have. Psychics, very good psychics since then, have told me I studied under Merlin. I was a disciple of his. And I've always felt that that realm of magic is all around us if you can tap into it. So when I see this character who looks a lot like what you would think Merlin might look like, there he is holding his hands out saying, "Come in, come in." I'm like, wow, this is pretty exciting. So that was one of my first experiences. I can't remember if I found this in Hawaii or Australia, but I found this. I'm attracted to crystals. I love my crystals. And I found this gorgeous double terminated crystal. And crystals have a lot of energy and power. If you hold them and absorb it and meditate on them, that can help you create the life you want and bring your desires to you. If your intentions are good, you can't wish to have somebody else's job or do something that would be harmful to anyone else. You have to have good intentions when you're doing that. But you can attract things to you. Esther and Jerry Hicks talked about the laws of attraction. Before I went and saw them in person and read their books, I always used to say to people, life is like a boomerang. Whatever you put out is what's going to come back to you. And people have marveled at my life. How did I get jobs that I didn't even know existed and didn't apply for and got hired with before I even knew what had happened? And all kinds of things. And I'm like, it's because of what I'm sending out to the universe. So that was my first experience with something like that. I'm at Colonial Homes at this time in Atlanta, and that's where I had the telegram show up with the job offer that I talk about in another one that a palm reader had told me would happen. And one night, I used to meditate a lot, and when I did, that helped open up my channels so I could tune in. I had a very strong dream about a man dressed in a gray suit. I could see his features very clearly. He was very real to me. And I knew in this dream that somehow I knew this man from another time. And it was so real that I woke up and I got up and I walked around. I went and got some water and I thought about it, and then I got back into bed. And my walls were white. And I hadn't closed my eyes yet. I'm lying on my side and I see this big cloud of smoke come out of nowhere right there next to the bed. Well, there was nothing burning. It didn't smell like smoke. I didn't have any candles lit or anything. And I'm like, where did this come from? Pinch me, am I dreaming? No, I was awake. And while I'm looking at that, it's like somebody took a black magic marker and started drawing a person. And it was this man I had seen in the dream. And they sketched out his, from up here up through his head. And I'm like, I think I'm going to meet him. I don't know how or when or why, but this man means something in my life, my history of lives, whatever. So a few months later, I have to go to California for some reason. And I mentioned that I had been and still am good friends with Pete McCloskey, my former California congressman. And we used to get together and have dinner or whatever. And so if we were around in the same city, so I called him and I said, Pete, I'm going to be in California. If you're around, let's have a cup of coffee or whatever. He said, no, I won't be there, but I have somebody I would like you to meet. However, he's down in Laguna. He's down in the LA area. You're going to be in San Mateo. Any chance you could go to LA? I'd love to introduce you. And he said he was my best man at my wedding. So I thought, well, that might be interesting. And hey, I'm up for adventure. So I get a ticket that takes me down to LA, and he's going to pick me up at the airport. Well, people can't come meet you at the gate like they used to. And I thought, how am I going to recognize him? He didn't say he'd have a rose in his lapel or anything like that. I should have asked him for a sign, but he didn't tell me that. He just said that he'd pick me up at the airport. So I get off the plane, and even with my own husband, after years of marriage, I cannot always spot him at the crowd in an airport. Even when we're at the same gate, I can't always see where he is. So finding a stranger in the LA airport was a challenge. But as I walk up to the area where the people are waiting to greet you, here is the man, the very man I've dreamed about and that was drawn in that picture. And it was him. I was shocked. And he looks exactly like him. And I thought, well, what does all of this mean? And he was single, and Pete said to me, you two would be perfect for each other. Well, we might have or might not have. I don't know. We never got to that point. But anyway, so we go to his home. He had a beautiful home right on some cliffs overlooking the water down in Laguna Niguel. And we'd gone out for dinner. We came back, and he had a fire going. And he had a wonderful LP record called You, Scorpio. Someone had done this for every sign of the 12 signs in the zodiac, and he was a Scorpio like I am. So he had the one for Scorpio. So he lights a fire, we have a glass of wine, and we're listening to this and all the traits. And it was quite lengthy, 20 minutes or so, talking about the qualities of Scorpio. So of course we have to compare and talk about our own qualities and what we heard them say. And we both had the sense that we had known each other before. And he said, okay, you're the one who's intuitive. What do you pick up? And I saw us in Egypt. And I felt we both were somehow involved in the priesthood, whatever we were doing. One was male, one was female. I was the female in that one, and he was male like we were in this life. And I could see us together. And I see him dying at about age 26 of something like consumption, TB, something like that. And I'm there by the bedside sobbing, and that he's leaving me, because we were very close in that life. And we made a promise that we would meet up again in another life. Now, whether we met anywhere in between 3,000 or 4,000 years ago in Egypt with the pyramids and the pharaohs and all in this life, I don't know. I didn't get that message, but here we were meeting at this time in the 1970s, early 1970s in California. And we just had a very magical 3 days together, and we were so connected. Well, it gets even better. I take the red eye home from California, getting in about 7:30, 8 o'clock. And I went right to work at the library, which was Stuart Lakewood down by the airport. So I came in on a flight that I could just go to work. And then after work, I was going to stop by the home of a friend of mine. And she also was very intuitive, extremely so. But I hadn't called her or told her anything about this other than that I'll see you after work. I'll be there about 6:30, 7 o'clock. And when I walk in the door of her apartment, she said, somebody came in with you. And I'm like, I don't see anybody. Who are you talking about, Alicia? And she said, his name is either Roy or Ray. And he's not in physical body, but he's right there behind you. Well, this man's name was Ray Winterhalter. So she's getting the Roy or Ray, and it was Ray. And before I'm like, shocked that she sees him in spirit, sees his energy, just like I had that dream and all. And she said, you two knew each other in Egypt. She got zoomed right in on that. She said, I mean, we had a lot of opportunities. The other California friend and I knew each other in Italy in the 1400s. So, it wasn't like we were locked into a certain continent or time frame. And she said, you all were so close, and you were brought up for the priesthood. So you had a certain relationship, but you had promised that you would meet again in another life, and he's here with you. And I found that fascinating. And we corresponded a little, and then his job took him to Japan, and my life was going other directions. So I saw him once after that. I was in California, in LA, and we went out to dinner, and he dropped me back I was in a motel, and he dropped me off. And I went in, and I was supposed to be, I guess we didn't go to dinner. I guess maybe we had coffee, because I was meeting somebody else for dinner that night, and I had to change and get ready for that. And I was changing and what have you, and something made me go look out the window, and he was still sitting there in his car, just sitting there. And I thought, that's strange. He sat there for about 20, 30 minutes, and then, I had to leave. But I thought that was very strange. And then we both ended up with other lives, ended up marrying somebody else. So obviously we were not meant to be together in this life, but we did have that very strong connection for a very short time. So that was magical. Then I met a man from Dallas named David, and he's the one I mentioned in my other video about being on an elevator, and somebody asked me what I could see about him, and I picked up Machiavelli and Italy and Renaissance and what have you, and he'd read The Prince 6 times and was really into that life. And we had a very strong connection. When you have a strong connection with somebody, it's practically tangible. So I was at a library convention in Dallas, and he lived there, and he came over, and we were in the Hyatt. And in the lobby of the Hyatt in those days, they had a raised area up about half a dozen steps, and you could sit there and have a glass of wine or a cup of tea or whatever and chat. So we're sitting there, and we had an extremely strong, that when I saw that elevator with him was so real. So we're sitting opposite each other, and he said, well, did you pick up anything else? Once you pick up something on somebody, they want to know, is there more? So I thought, okay, I'll just sort of relax and focus and get balanced and centered and, have a minute or two of meditating. So when I did, and I opened my eyes, the strangest thing, it has only happened that one time to me. I'm sitting in my seat. He was a Taurus, which is my opposite. It's what my husband is that I'm married to today. But he's sitting on one side of this little table, cocktail table, and I'm on the other side. And all of a sudden, his aura, his soul, his energy came out just like a beam toward me, and I could feel mine leaving my body, and we met in the middle, and I could feel our energies totally merge in the middle of the table. And then they kept going. I went into his body, and he went into mine, and I could feel and think everything he was feeling and knowing and thinking. I was totally inside of him. And this is the middle of the day. All I've had is my Coca-Cola to drink. And then just the way as it happened, we backed out, and we meet again in the center, and there was a total, like two souls just totally merged there, and then back into our own bodies. And I'm just staring at him. I can't even, I started shaking, really. It was such a strong physical experience. I'm like this. And he looked at me and he said, what just happened? I said, Lord only knows. I don't know. And we talked about it, and we each experienced the same feelings and emotions and the energy connecting and all. It was really wild. It was like the two of us were one in there, and then we were ourselves, and it was crazy. But I was so shook up over that. I was no longer a librarian. That was the year I had quit being a librarian. But I did want to go see all of my friends. I was so shook up, and he was too. So he left, went back to work, and I went back into the big convention hall where they had all the displays, and all my library friends were wandering around. And I'm just shaking. I'm falling apart over this it was such a tangible experience. And I ran into former classmates and people I worked with, and some of my professors from library school and all, who were good friends. And I'm like, you all won't believe what just happened to me. It was just a phenomenal experience. And, when you open yourself up to things, you never know what's going to happen. But right there were three experiences. The first man from California, whom I knew in the Renaissance days, and then this man who also I knew in the Renaissance days, and then the one from Egypt. So you're coming into contact, whether you know it or not, with souls you have interacted with before. And you might have been the opposite sex last time. You might have been parents or friends or, who knows what. But, and it's not always working off karma. I think it's just, they say you travel in soul groups. Now, I don't know how true this is. I only know what other people are picking up. I've never tried to tap into that. But they say that about 1,100 souls are traveling in a soul group through different lives. You won't be here at the same life at the same time necessarily, but you will be in and out of each other's lives through that time as you come through the centuries. And to me, what this life is all about, it's a learning experience. I know they say you're here to work off your karma. Well, probably are doing some of that. But I think we're each here to grow, to create. The universe expands through our creating things, whether it's music or poetry or designing buildings or whatever we're doing, coming up with scientific discoveries or medicines and all. We're here to create, and we're here for our souls to learn and to grow so that we can someday return to the eternal source, which is God. And people say, well, how do you see God? What do you think God is? And I said, God is pure love and light. The heart chakra is the most important one. That's where your love comes from. And if you come from a place of love in whatever you do and however you treat people and animals and the planet, then you're doing God's work and you're doing what will make you grow and be able to someday return home. But I see God as this brilliant sun. When people have had out-of-body experiences or feel like they've died and gone to heaven and all, they say God is so brilliant you can't see God really. You only see the brilliance of God. And I have always seen God like a huge, brilliant sun full of the light, and you can feel the love. It's so palpable. And I think of each of us as the little sparks. The sun is always shooting off little sparks with their sun flares and all. And I think each soul is a little spark that has come into a physical form, because that's the only way you can truly experience Earth. And this is supposed to be a very unusual planet because of our physicality and because we're given choices and options. And that's the only way we will grow. And sometimes we grow through our mistakes, and sometimes we grow through our triumphs. But whatever it is, this is what my belief is. You can have your own experience. My word is only what is comfortable for me. But if you decide to meditate and you want to find out more about yourself and you get quiet, you can go inward. And they say we each have a guardian angel who is assigned to our soul through all of our lives. I call mine Lady A, and she's always there when I need her. And then I've had angels show up several times. I will talk about those in my book. I've had 3 or 4 times when angels took physical form and helped me in a very serious situation. And so that's a beautiful thing. And then they say we have other angels, doctor angels, and other kinds of angels who work with us and help us. And I give thanks to all of them. I love my angels. I love the dragons. We have dragons around us. I love dragons and angels and unicorns and magic. As the song says, I believe in magic. And I hope you do too. And I hope that if you get my book, blame it on the full moon when it comes out. We're working on that. But I have to finish it first, which I'm working on too, in between talking to you all. But I hope that you enjoy reading it and find some of it fun or interesting or helpful along the way, and that we experience the journey together. Thank you so much for being here. And with that, good night.